She-Hulk is arguably the worst TV show of all time. Everything about this show just makes me so angry. They took a beloved character in She-Hulk and ruined everything that made her good. And instead of taking responsibility for their actions, Disney decided to just blame the fans. They called us sexist, women-hating incels. Well, you know what, Disney? Screw you. Screw you and everything you stand for. I'm not going to watch any more of this boring, uninspired, and woke garbage. I'm hereby boycotting Wakanda forever.
Who's with me?
Listen, it's time we all accept the fact that the MCU, or should I say, the MSHU, is dead. Or is it? So, She-Hulk is finished, and I'm just going to go out there and say it, but it's not that bad. Oh, how dare I say that?
Go on, vilify me.
No, but seriously guys, it's really not that bad. It's nothing special, but it's also not the worst TV show ever made. Not by a long shot. It's not even the worst Marvel show. That honor happily goes to
Your mom!
Now, She-Hulk doesn't follow a typical superhero plotline, also because it's not a superhero show. Jennifer tells us this in the first episode and she keeps reminding us. It's a comedy law show with a superhero twist. This series isn't about She-Hulk rising up to the task of becoming a world-defending hero, it's about Jennifer's struggles with balancing her two identities. She just wants to be a normal lawyer, which she has worked very hard to become, but then due to a freak accident, she gains Hulk abilities and she begins to struggle with her identity. People start treating her differently when she's either Jennifer or the She-Hulk, and this first season mainly focuses on her dealing with these struggles in very normal and relatable situations such as her dating life and her job. Obviously, since she's a Hulk, these situations become very wild and over the top, which is where the comedic factor is supposed to come from. It's not a show that everyone will enjoy, not at all. It's certainly different from pretty much any other property in the whole Infinity Saga, but that also means it's okay to not like it. I'm not going to pretend like this show is amazing or that it's even necessarily good. To me, it was a bang average TV show until the last couple of episodes, which I actually did enjoy. However, there are people who really like this show, and there are people who despise it, and both opinions are valid. A lot of the discourse surrounding the show focuses on incel types attacking the show, and then the show making an active effort to call them out. And while this topic is of course hilarious, I've already talked about it in a previous video, in which I also discussed the catcalling controversy from the first episode, so I won't go into too much depth with that in this video. I want to rather focus on the show itself, because while there absolutely are people out there who hate the show just because it has a female lead who calls them silly boys for getting so worked up about their superhero movies not being the way they want them to be, they are still a vocal minority. Yes, some of the people who hate on this show and call it the worst piece of media in existence probably have an unhealthy relationship towards women. But most people who don't like this show just don't like this show. And that's fine. It's not perfect, but I also don't think it's really all that bad. This is a different style of TV show than we're used to when it comes to superhero shows. It doesn't have some overarching story that every episode is slowly building up towards by increasing the tension and the stakes. There are some themes and plot points that are consistent throughout the season that are important at the end, but like a lot of comedy shows, many of the episodes could stand on their own, and that's again fine. Many of the sitcoms that I love, such as The Office or Friends or Modern Family, they do have some overarching narratives, and the plot does move forward, but it's not like if you skip a couple of episodes that you won't know what's going on. No, this show has decided upon this style and structure, and while you may not like it, you may not enjoy watching it, you can't really criticize this choice by itself. Perhaps you just don't like that style of TV shows, and when you watch a superhero story, maybe you want it to have a clear-cut beginning, middle, and end. And if that's the case, then yeah, She-Hulk probably isn't for you. Not every show can possibly be for everyone. That's just not possible. However, just because it's fine that a show is structured in a specific way, doesn't mean that it's necessarily doing it well. The thing is, I dropped this show very early on because I just wasn't getting that invested, especially with all the other shows coming out. Even Rings of Power was higher on my watch list. But it was weird though, because I was having a decent time while actually watching the episodes. There just wasn't enough there for me to want to come back week in and week out. And once I missed 1 week, then it just started building. And I'm not fully sure why this show didn't capture me. Maybe it's the genre that's just not my favorite, or maybe the writing just isn't that good. I'm sure there are many different opinions on this, however, I finally decided to watch the remainder of the season, and I ended up having a decent time. I had to kind kinda force myself to keep going at times, but the final 2 episodes were actually fun. Daredevil was one of the main reasons people wanted to watch this show in the first place, and I don't think they could have portrayed him much better. In his first scene, he schools Jennifer in the courtroom, which he of course should because she's much less experienced. But then we see some of that Charlie Cox charisma shine through when he flirts with Jennifer in the bar, in which afterwards they slug it out in a parking lot, beat up some goons, and then later Jennifer gets herself some of that Charlie Cock. Honestly, their dynamic was really fun. I thought their chemistry was great, and this little glimpse of Daredevil done right has me excited for his upcoming TV show. Now the finale was something. It was very meta. Perhaps to a fault. It felt a little on the nose, especially since the show hasn't really been building towards it too much, except for the occasional Jennifer fourth wall break. But honestly, I like that they did something unexpected. Many of us have been complaining for a long time now that so many Marvel projects have begun to feel the same, but She-Hulk is at the very least unique. Whether you like the fourth wall stuff or think it had no meaning or purpose, I think we can all agree that this show was different. It tried to do something. I mean, these superhero properties always end with some big CGI slugfest, and only the best MCU projects have actually managed to stay focused on the characters and the story during these final battles. The characters don't get lost in it. She-Hulk rather just says to hell with that, and it removes the possibility of even making this mistake in the first place. Jennifer has multiple times tried to make sure the story stays focused on her and her little problems, because it's her show. But the story keeps wanting to go to something grander. It wants to have a big team-up battle at the end against Hulkified Mark Zuckerberg. But Jennifer forces the story to focus back on her and her issues. That's the thing, this show really only had a couple of goals. Trigger some haters, not take itself too seriously, and entertain. Now it's up to you whether or not you think that it succeeded in this, or whether this was even what you wanted out of She-Hulk, but I at least admire them for doing something different. Is this what I want out of every MCU show? No, of course not. It would get very old very quickly. However, this is very in line with the character of She-Hulk, and I don't mind having a little more lightheartedness before the dread that is going to be Phase 5 and 6. And also, talking about faithfulness to the character, everything I've seen about She-Hulk's character being ruined is just not true. The breaking of the fourth wall is very her. And listen, I don't need the MCU to be faithful, because it's not. They changed so many things from the comics, but people naturally only complain when they don't like those changes. However, with She-Hulk, she's arguably one of the more comic book accurate characters we've had, so even if you don't like her or the show, you can't really say much about ruining the character. Now you may think that I'm being very generous towards this show, and perhaps I am, but what do I think is wrong with it? Well, to start off, I didn't find it particularly funny. It definitely has its moments where I thought to myself, okay, that was kinda funny, but it's far from a show that I laughed at while watching. There aren't any jokes that really stuck with me. Humor is of course subjective, and I think there are absolutely people who generally find this show hilarious. I just personally don't find the style of comedy much different to the rest of the MCU, which also rarely makes me laugh in the first place. Now the CGI is another point of contention. People really like slating how She-Hulk looks, but I think this is one of the milder problems with the show. I don't really care, because this is a comedy show. It honestly reminded me of being a child and watching some dumb show where the visual effects look atrocious, but we didn't care because it was silly. That's what this feels like. Now these CGI issues are a growing concern within the MCU in general, but for this show in isolation, I didn't mind too much. She-Hulk's facial expressions in serious moments were a little bit limited, however, and it takes away from Tatiana's performance, which is actually quite solid. My only other gripe with the CGI is that despite them being quite aware of it, they're likely not going to change anything, and still just sentence their workers to death. You know what would have been really meta, is if they had purposefully been decreasing the level of CGI in their projects up until this show, but then after this finale where they call it out, every project from now on starts looking flawless, and we find out that all the VFX artists are getting paid millions. Now that would have been a good twist. However, sadly that doesn't seem to be the case, but a man can hope. Now, would I watch this show if it wasn't connected to the MCU? Well, probably not. It's not the kind of show that I particularly enjoy, and despite the fact that I don't think it's really all that bad, I still think the execution of the idea left a lot to be desired, and is definitely not for everyone. If you don't want to watch a show that tackles some of the daily struggles women go through, such as being a woman in the professional field, the struggles of finding a good man, and even the more serious ones like getting slut-shamed and harassed, then no one's forcing you to watch it. But that's the story that they have chosen to tell, and it obviously means something to a lot of people, even if it doesn't mean something to everyone. I personally didn't mind this show focusing so heavily on Jennifer and her problems, rather than some bigger story. For example, I quite liked the episode where Jennifer just went to therapy. Her character arc is not some big superhero motivational, I need to step up and save the world type of thing. She's just a regular person who's trying to balance these two identities. She also has a very negative relationship with men, which we see throughout the season. But then she goes to therapy and talks to good men. Then she finds Matt Murdock, who's a really good guy. It's character development, whether you like it or not. And even her letting her anger take control at the end of the penultimate episode and hulking out is a throwback to the first episode. This show was never trying to say that Jennifer is perfect. However, it has been constantly saying that Jennifer is not perfect. Yes, her experiences as a woman have led her to needing to be good at controlling her emotions, but that doesn't mean she's perfect at doing it. Her letting anger take control of her shows that maybe she could indeed have learned a thing or two from Bruce, instead of just waving off his issues and experiences the way she did. That's the thing, Jen is not flawless. She's just a regular person who has regular human flaws. Her character is consistent even if you don't like it, which again is fine. I'm not saying you can't hate this show, I'm just trying to provide a little counter argument to the discourse, because this show is not out to get you. There's no message that Jen is better than other people or that men are bad and women are good. I get it. This show doesn't always depict men in the best light. It brings to the surface some of the toxic, creepy, and weird personalities of men that women deal with, but naturally with a comedic exaggeration. I mean, there are still good men in this show, plenty of them. The best example, of course, being Matt Murdock. But yes, the show does depict men in a bad light sometimes. But I just don't understand getting angry at this. Like, why would you take it personally? If you're not a woman-hating incel online, then why would you get angry at this portrayal? Now, while people not liking this show is completely fair, a lot of the actual outrage itself was just way too over-exaggerated. The Megan Thee Stallion twerking clip that went viral made me think it was like an important plot point, but it was literally just a post-credit scene. It was harmless. It was uncontroversial. It was literally just made to make people laugh. And if it didn't make you laugh, then that's fine, but just move on. It's not that deep. Now, while I do think it could have been handled much better and explored in a more serious way that doesn't overshadow the actual problem, I still found it hilarious how the show predicted the outrage and made fun of incels and just She-Hulk haters in general in the show. And if you feel offended at this, then you might be one of the people they're calling out. Like, let's not kid ourselves. There were absolutely people who were going to hate She-Hulk no matter how the show turned out, because you can't really write She-Hulk in a way that wouldn't upset these people. Then it just wouldn't be She-Hulk anymore. So yes, I don't mind that she calls out whiny men in every episode because it's funny seeing people get mad about it. And these people were going to get angry either ways, so why not troll them a little? Again, and this is the last time I'm saying this, but it's fine if you don't like She-Hulk. You're not toxic for not liking She-Hulk. You're not a woman hater, necessarily, for not liking She-Hulk. Is that clear? Or should I say it again? So overall, this show is very average. However, it is also a phenomenon. Like, there really isn't much to say about it as a show, but then again, there's also so much to say about it, because it seemed like everyone on Twitter was reacting to it week in and week out. Listen, I get that people are angry and that this show has possibly offended some people, and that's valid, but I just don't see it. I don't see why this show is so bad. It could have been written better and it could have executed things better, but at least it's consistent in what it's trying to be, and it succeeds at telling Jennifer's story. But what do you guys think? This is of course a controversial topic, and you're all free to give your own thoughts and opinions down below. Just try to be respectful towards each other. That's all I ask. Thank you to my patrons and Ben Joseph, and good night.